kids today may not know, what exactly the hell we're talking about.
Kids, I'm going to sit down on Uncle Doug. I'm going to tell you a story here.
I'm born into this. I have no choice. The shirt was thrown on me from a young age, the starter jacket. That cymbal clash is the perfect spot. I'm learning now. You see, it's the great spot to start fading out the intro music. It gets better every time.
It does.
It really does.
So good.
Man.
It's so good.
Awesome. Well, welcome into the Twisted Arrows podcast. Rob Stott alongside Doug Marsh. And if you're watching the video version, if you read the headline and didn't just hit play, I wish you would have just hit play. That'd be great. We got some loyal fans already.
Heck yeah.
You're just diving right in, but you could tell from the jerseys we got on, it's a football day. It's a football day here on Twisted Arrows podcast. So,
yeah,
Doug,
absolutely.
Gonna be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Football is king in this country. It was already building, but in my youth, in my 80s youth, I think it surpassed baseball, and it has not looked back. We have football on. We record this on a certain day, and I was thinking this past Tuesday was like one of the first days. Like, man, they didn't even know football on. I mean, I was like, this is wild.
Well, actually,
there's football on every day.
It's incredible you mentioned that. I remember thinking back to one of the early weeks of the football season, and if you count college football and NFL, there was a stretch. We might still be in the middle of it, where
we had it every day.
55 of 56 days there was football on TV in some form or fashion.
That is unreal.
Yeah. I mean, the NFL has absolutely taken over. You think about it used to just be Sunday and then Monday. I know once college football season wraps up, they did play on Saturdays, and they still do that as well.
Yep.
But it's gotten to a point where you have 3 days off a week because the Thursday night football is going to happen.
Yep.
College football Saturday,
Yep.
NFL on Sunday, NFL on Monday. That's 4 days a week of just you're getting football, and those are joyous days.
They really
they bring out the best of the areas that those games happen.
Absolutely, no, they absolutely do, and I make no bones about it. I'm much more of a baseball guy than a football guy, but I do love football. I ironically, I went to a school at UNCW. I will promote them heavily on here. It's the greatest school ever. We had no football team. So, basketball is king at UNCW, and we had good baseball as well. But, going to a school as a kid who loved football and not having it is very weird. But it allowed me to watch on Saturdays and just like everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I get to watch not as a fan. It's not,
right.
It's not, oh my gosh, my school lost today, this stinks. I get to just watch and be like, this is amazing. So I love Saturday football. I make no bones about it. I'm much more of a Saturday guy than a Sunday guy. But I do know I am a football nerd as well, so I know my football history on the pro side. But I do love the college football game.
Yeah, it's a good one. And so Duquesne, you talk about a school that, obviously A10 for basketball, and that's really where the bread, I guess, is made on that campus. But a big football program in not FBS, I think it's the FCS, the NEC, the Northeast Conference is what they're in now. But a wildly successful team too.
Very
they
good.
had years of winning records and very under the radar. They're not going to go and compete with a Penn State in the state of Pennsylvania, even a Pitt. They couldn't compete with a Pitt in the city that they're from. But weird to see a school that in that city where, you talk about football towns, Pittsburgh being probably one of the football towns in the country.
Western Pennsylvania, man.
It is a cradle for, some talented individuals to come out.
Absolutely.
And, I think about one, there actually is one right before my time of getting there, but I got there's an NFL player from Duquesne.
Okay.
Lee Bodden, undrafted, ends up playing cornerback for Cleveland Browns. So talk about someone.
Interesting.
I think he wasn't from Pittsburgh, so I don't think it would have been hard for him to go from being from there to having to play for the Cleveland Browns. But a guy that there's some football ties too with Duquesne and what's going on out there. But
very nice.
It's in the fabric of this country is
It
football. You
truly
said
is.
it.
It absolutely is. And, and like when we think about us and we think about our eras and stuff like that, once again, Rob is he's a Philly guy.
Yeah.
He's got the 4 major sports, so it's going to be pretty easy to say who his team was. But growing up in North Carolina, we don't have a professional team until 1995. So I can remember, kids, I'm going to sit down on Uncle Doug. I'm going to tell you a story here. When I was a kid, like in the late 70s, I was 5 or 6 years old. Cereal was like a big deal because it came with prizes in it, and you open up the box and it's like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing. And randomly they would sometimes throw these license plates for your bikes. Now they were plastic, they weren't metal, but and when you poured it out, I poured out a Pittsburgh Steeler license plate. I don't know who the Pittsburgh. I don't even know where Pittsburgh is,
what?
man.
Like, what is this?
But I'm like, cool. And you put it on there, and then oh, hey, by the way, they're really good.
Yeah, they kind of are. They're an okay team.
Yeah, and so this would have been like 79, 80. It was
heyday.
It was
tail end of the era, right?
Yeah, and they were winning their 4th
Yep.
Super Bowl over the Rams.
Yep.
And so up until 95, Doug was a Pittsburgh Steeler fan.
Okay. Well, that's such a unique thing, right? To be able to talk to someone, I'm born into this. I have no choice.
Right.
The shirt was thrown on me from a young age, the starter jacket with the little Velcro, flap in the front. You got to see it kind of be born in your area. So, you get the Panthers. You mentioned it in 95, and not super. Kerry Collins is there. Like, what's it like watching a franchise be born, a professional franchise be born in your area?
It was wild to because we got it a couple years. It took 2 years or so before we actually played. They announced it. And there was, Baltimore had lost their team. They had moved to Indianapolis. And so it was down to, it seemed like maybe even Memphis may have been involved, Baltimore, Memphis, Jacksonville, and Charlotte. And they announced, Charlotte was getting a team, but they weren't sure about the other team. So Jacksonville actually had to wait.
Mm-hmm.
But so we found out we had our team in like 93, and they immediately is the height of the mid 90s where all the teams were going, like Atlanta had switched to the beautiful black and silver, and everybody wanted a pair of black pants and stuff like that. It just looked so cool, and so the Panthers immediately grabbed a hold of like, hey, we're gonna go black and teal, or a Carolina electric blue they call it, or whatever, but silver pants, Raider style with black jerseys and silver helmets. Almost it was very similar to a Raider uniform, but it was so beautiful with the electric blue. And and then we go to our first draft, and we get once again, kids, they don't ever do this anymore, but they had such. Tampa Bay comes in 76, and it takes them 2 years to win a game.
Mm-hmm.
So they lose every game their first year, and then into the second year, they're still losing. And so that had been the last expansion. And so they were like, okay, we have to help these.
A little different for you guys.
They gave the Panthers 2 first-round, 2 second-round picks those first years. And we even traded, I think we ended up having 3. I think it was Kerry Collins, Tyrone Poole, and Blake Brockemeyer. So it was like a quarterback, a defensive back, and a lineman. Mm-hmm. And these guys were around for a very long time. But, Jacksonville, same deal. They got their 2 picks as well. And I think within 2 years.
Your second year, you lose in the conference championship.
Yeah,
like a 12-4 team, right?
Yeah.
In 96, and it's like, what? Like out of nowhere.
It did come out. So the first year they're okay. They lose their first 5 games, but then they beat the Jets with Bubby Brister, who he wasn't good in the Steelers, and here he was at the Jets, but and then they took off. Yeah. And they finished 7-9 in that first year. And they actually random trivia question, they played Clemson. So the first year is played in Death Valley at Clemson Tiger mm-hmm. Stadium, and then while the stadium's being built. And so the next year, Charlotte opens up, Carolina Stadium, which became Erickson, which I don't even think is that even around
brand,
anymore?
Right? Yeah, it was
it was a
service.
cell, yeah,
Like
it was
cell
a
service.
cell phone brand from Europe, I
Right.
believe.
Yeah. It's just like random.
Randomly
Yeah.
sponsored, the Panther Stadium, so Ericsson Stadium,
Unreal.
and that team is great, and they do. I was thinking about it. There's a Super Bowl contender that we were watching. Buffalo was 5-4, got beat the other night to go to 5-5. I remember the Panthers that year were 5-4, and then ran off 7
It went off.
straight.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we are at the last game that year. They was Pittsburgh, and
oh no, your worlds collide.
it was. So Pittsburgh's probably the most popular team in the country. I know I'll get some fights from Dallas and stuff, but I don't care where you go in the world, there are Steeler fans. It's wild. So the stadium was about half and half that day, and
you're lucky.
The Panthers needed to win the West, random, because that's where we came in. It was us, Atlanta, San Francisco, LA. It made no sense, but anyway, we needed to win the division and get the bye. And Pittsburgh is throwing in the end zone at the end, and a guy named Chad Cota intercepts a pass to seal the victory and give the Panthers their conference championship, their division.
Yeah. Yep.
And so we're there that day,
That's
and
incredible.
It was just like amazing. So just like that.
And I mean, like there's rough years in there, of course, but never really like a severe down for the Panthers. You're kind of in one, right? You get the Matt Rule era kind of puts a damper on how things have been. But I mean, you mentioned Collins, and not too long after you get Delhomme go off to a Super Bowl. A good streak of success.
Then it falls off. There's a year you're missing because they won their opening game and lost 15 straight, and that's how they get. That's how they get Cam Newton, I believe. Yeah. Because they get the number 1 pick.
The Jimmy Clausen era.
I believe they won the opening game and then lost 15 straight, and so
that's nuts.
Yeah. But like you say, it was wild because everybody just was. It was all new and cool, and they were good, and so it lit the area up, and they've got this awful song. You can go YouTube it. It's called "Stand and Cheer for the Panthers." Don't play it anymore.
It's not a Fly Eagles Fly, right?
But
no one's going to be belting that out.
But it sounds straight out of the 50s. Like who wrote this? But
that's awesome.
Now it's nostalgic, and now you're like, oh man, they need to bring the "Stand and Cheer for the Panthers" song back. But anyway, go YouTube, "Stand and Cheer for the Panthers." You will be busting out laughing. But
that's crazy.
It was awesome, to see it come together, and they come back the next year with almost the same team. And Bill Romanowski in preseason breaks Gary Collins' jaw on what would be considered a very dirty hit.
Incredibly.
underneath this helmet, broke his jaw. He was never the same.
No.
He ends up getting arrested, and he gets in trouble. And the next thing you know, he's at the Saints. And our world, and it was actually Steve Berline who took over for him, who I believe was a Notre Dame guy.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that's the birth.
That's great. It's a great kind of it's not even coming out of the ashes, right? Because there wasn't nothing to like be burnt down from.
Nope.
Just a quick rise to success, and great way to really, I think, take hold in that area, right? So that,
absolutely,
you have that success, and then you can build a fan base really quickly. Obviously, you get the 2 years to work on it and market the team and know that it's coming, but. If they suck, it would not have been hard to get some fans.
It would not have been the same. And we're talking football, and we're going to talk football. But the reason we got that team was the support the Hornets got, and we get the Hornets in like 88, 89, and they built what was at the time I think the largest arena in the country for them. It had you could seat 24,000 people in this basketball arena. It was enormous. If you were in an end zone. The other goal was you were probably closer to a football game.
Yeah.
But it was to the point they built it so big it was too big, and it's actually no longer there. It wasn't open for super long. They redid it. There's a new arena in Charlotte downtown, but they built it for them, and for something like 5 years they sold out every night, 24,000 people these Hornets games. And that they used that as evidence to be like, hey, they will support professional sports. It's not just a college.
That's awesome.
College sports state. that's my era, completely different than your era, as you talk about being born with the shirt on. So what then, it seems yours is a little bit different. What's your first like Eagle memory?
So there are memories of Cunningham. And it would have been his last year, like the 90s ish. I know he's there before I'm born, right? So you get those early years that I don't get to see the success. It's like one of those. He's growing with the city, but I get I remember his last year and being a fan, and then watching him leave and being heartbroken about that. It's like the end of the Rich Kotite era.
Rich Kotite.
There's a name. So kind of born angry, right? Like watching this superhero of yours get traded to another team, not really being a fan for that long, getting kind of brought into what it's like to be heartbroken right away as an Eagles fan.
And you had lost Reggie before then, too, who was another absolute icon of that city.
So then my first real like regular Eagles memories, they're with Ray Rhodes and Rodney Peete. And like that's which I know a guy that Rodney Peete that you have for a year or so.
He is, right? Yeah. He absolutely plays for the Panthers. Yeah, he was a USC kid, I believe, and
absolutely great. So talk about that, Rodney Peete. I run into him at a Dodgers game, divisional series game in like 2010, 2011. They're playing the Diamondbacks, team I don't really feel like talking about right now, but I walking around the stadium, had like a good friend of an industry friend from kind of work days that had tickets and got us into his box. Rodney Peete's there. So I'm like, this is amazing. so one of my for early Eagles heroes of sorts. Not super successful era for him, but neat to see him, like the first guy I remember about being an Eagles fan. But have that, and then of course I think one of the early, like, I remember where I was type things is watching the draft and McNabb coming in and getting booed.
Booed.
Right? The big boo. So Andy Reid and, early years for him. I think we talked about it in, the baseball episode, but, I looked up the timing and it wasn't right. I know that, Doug is there as a quarterback in 99. So 2001, Andy Reid comes in and, I'm sorry, McNabb comes in, and that's where, of course, everything takes off. And a franchise 1933, so 80, 90 years, we're over 91 years, and it's got a storied history, of course, and so much recent success. I feel like as an Eagles fan, been spoiled, right? I say that, and it's like, well, one Super Bowl, but you look at some of these other franchises. But if you look back at some of those early years and what it was like to be an Eagles fan, a franchise that's still under 500. We're like 10 games under 500. We're pushing it. We're pushing it back, and this recent stretch with Sirianni and Hurts, and two seasons starting 8-1 in a row, and where it's kind of like the heyday for the Eagles. They really owned that NFC East, the 2000s, that entire decade, with Andy Reid, and then the slump, Chip Kelly, Reid leaves, Kelly comes in, and thought he'd be the mover and shaker, the offensive innovator that everyone dreamt he would be, and quick success. It was like lightning in a bottle.
He did.
Flash in a pan type thing,
Immediate.
First year,
boom,
everyone caught on.
Everyone
caught on to what he was doing, and it didn't really work out, and but it's been an interesting stretch to kind of grow up with this team, see the vet, what that atmosphere was like for an Eagles game, to now what the link is like, and it's a fan base, man.
I love it. Yeah, no, it's my relationship to that is video games, because I grew up in the height of video games, the NES in 85, and it's pre-Madden.
Oh, okay. Tecmo Bowl?
It's Tecmo Bowl. Tecmo Bowl was like the greatest thing ever, because it's weird to think about, kids, but the NFL said, no, you cannot use but the Players Association said yes. So obviously,
It's like the reverse of the old like what happened more recently with NCAA. NCAA is like, yes, use our the name, image, likeness, but players were like,
we can't use
we
the
can't
players.
get money.
That's right. So you could use a city because that's just a city. You just couldn't say Philadelphia Eagles.
Right. You could Philadelphia with green and silver.
Yeah,
Kelly green and silver, but nothing
I
else.
don't even think they did that. I think they tried to stay away from the colors. But it was the real players. And so you could play with these teams. And so like the Giants were the heyday, mid 80s, the Taylor, Phil Simms, all these guys. And you could play Herschel Walker and all these amazing players. So I always jokingly said that one of the greatest things for me to build my interest in football was video games.
Absolutely.
And Tecmo Bowl and Super Tecmo Bowl. And then, Madden comes into play when EA, gets further in.
Yep.
And EA makes the greatest college games ever
really
as well.
Yeah.
And you got to
coming back. They will be coming back.
Yes. They've been teasing it for 3 years now, but supposedly it's coming back. And these college offenses and fight songs and all this stuff, it was so cool. So when I always talk about, love of football, it really does tie back into video games, trading cards.
Yeah.
I don't know, trading cards are kind of making a little bit of a comeback here because, they realize that they are special and they can do all these cool things with trading cards. But man, I've got some classic trading cards from the late 70s, early 80s that, I don't even know who these people are, but they just look cool. But it was all this sort of stuff that really got me into the game.
Video games, they cross generation. I think obviously they look different. We can have a whole, and I know we will have a whole episode on video games and that aspect of life. But you talk about what gets people into it today, and I had this written down as a point to bring up, and it's fantasy.
It's huge.
There's
pure genius.
Yeah, well, watching that launch and just how easy it makes it to get involved and engaged with the sport, and how easy how perfectly it lines up with the sport as well. Because there are other, people get fantasy crazy, right? There's fantasy soccer, there's fantasy basketball, fantasy baseball. Yeah. No other sport is more tailored to the way fantasy sports are done than football. It's a weekly thing. You set your lineup, you make trades, you act like you're the couch general manager of a team.
Heck yeah.
And, it's perfect. You could sit there, watch the stats and everything. You don't have to worry about my guy's playing 3 times this week.
Right.
Who's my starting pitcher? Right. Is my pitcher in the rotation in line to? It is a seamless, incredible experience to own a fantasy, manage a fantasy team, and not today it's like you own 6 of them at once, and it's like you're normal.
But it was genius, and it truly did make the game explode. If you go back and look at a video from the 50s and 60s and look at the crowd who's at a football game, you can see who's there, who's interested. Yes. What fantasy did is they opened it up for everybody. And now football it's not just male dominated or whatever. Everybody can participate in fantasy, and it brings the interest level way up. And that you absolutely can say that is what took it to the next level. Granted, it was popular,
right?
Don't get me wrong, but the ability, when I was sitting there, gosh, this would have been 20 years ago, at maybe after a church service or something, and the entire group, hey, we're going to go get some lunch, and the entire group, husbands, wives, kids, talking about fantasy.
Right.
And it was like this new revelation. I was like, oh man, this is incredible.
So I think about the leagues that I'm in, and it kind of helps reconnect the eras of my life. So I'm in a high school league. I'm in a college league. I'm in a work league. It's just it has that way of bringing either keeping you connected with that community, right? Reconnecting with the friends of old, or I don't know if people like talking about work like family, but that has its own stigma. But it kind of allows you to make those create deeper connections within those communities. So it's doing more beyond just the sport, right? And we could have a whole,
Sure.
there might be another taking off point this year with Taylor Swift and you talk about bringing in new fans.
Yes.
But that's just for that's for SEO. We gotta get the Taylor effect on here.
That's right.
But no, it is incredible what fantasy football has
It
done
did.
for this
It's
sport.
It's unreal. It truly connects the eras. It connects the generations. It connects everybody.
And
it's
it makes
amazing.
it, not that it was tough to watch 3 games a day on a Sunday, but like
Mm-hmm.
it's done a lot to take the fan. Great example, diehard Philly. I would only care about 1 game a week.
Right.
Until
Right.
What else is going on in the division? Check out
Right.
the other NFC East teams. Now it's like I care about that Thursday night game. I care about Prime because it might be Chicago and Carolina,
Right.
but I've
got a running back on there.
I got DJ Moore in my lineup, so I need him to go off, or Cole Kmet. Right?
Yeah.
It's it's
But
crazy.
that was the and it allowed these guys to market themselves as well, because
Yeah.
nobody knows the third string wide receiver running back's name on a team.
Right.
In my day, I can tell you who started for certain teams, but then like the backup, I got no idea. And now you're like,
I gotta handcuff my guy, so I got I gotta know what's going on
here. You're sitting there chatting, it's like, oh, hey, I got so and so on my team now, and you're like, oh my goodness, how do you know this person?
Right, it's unreal what it's done.
It is.
But
it is. I think you could. It was a great point, man. I think you could single-handedly say that, in the last 20 years, football has gone. Granted, 20 years ago, we were probably still on Sunday and Monday. That was still. And then in this last 20 years, it is.
And we have a Black Friday game. By the time that it'll be long gone by the time we ultimately publish this. But there's a Black Friday game this year that they are making a big deal. It's the first ever Black Friday football NFL game.
First ever Black Friday, and Black Friday was always college football day.
Mm-hmm.
You would get, Colorado, Oklahoma. You would get, whoever. Sometimes it'd be North Carolina State here, but it was typically like,
right.
Thursdays
were reserved for Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah.
And now we've got Thanksgiving football.
Yes, and there were only
Cowboys
2 games on, and I can remember like you have the 12:30 and the 4 game, and then
now there's an 8 o'clock.
Yeah, because Ole Miss and Mississippi State always played the Egg Bowl at night, so you would have 2.
Yeah.
You have these 2 pro games, and then you would have this college game at night. Well, not anymore. Now you got 3 pro games.
If I remember right, Eagles Cardinals was like one of the early Thursday night games on Thanksgiving. That stands out to me because I remember watching. It was the year that we crushed the Cardinals on Thursday night, only to lose to them in the I believe it was the NFC Championship game that year.
Gotcha.
08, 09.
Is that when they go and lose to Pittsburgh?
It is. It is. And in a game that I you could ask any of my college friends that were in the room. We all wrote final scores up on the board for that game, correctly predicted that score. Larry Fitzgerald seams up the middle and catches that touchdown to go up. They were up 23-20 at that point. And I remember I just pointed to the board. I was like, look, there's still time and my score could hit. And what do you know? Santonio Holmes in the back of the end zone with probably one of the most ridiculous catches in Super Bowl history.
This is a little bit of at that point in time, I had lost complete interest in the NFL.
Yeah.
So I don't. It's one of the few Super Bowls I don't know anything about. Right. So I got okay. It's just I don't know what was up at that time, but I had lost interest. The next year, I was offered the Red Zone.
Oh yeah. There's another moment, right?
It brought me back.
Yeah, it's
the Red Zone. Now granted, I've heard some people say this is the dumbest thing ever, and I don't understand them because I think it's the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
To sit there and
Scott Hansen, people man crush on Scott Hansen. So
it's like, but
the way
I would sit there, man, it was so good. I play music at church on Sunday, so I'd get home, I would take eat some lunch at 1 o'clock, turn on Scott. Let's be honest, by 1:30, 1:45, I was napping, but an hour in, I wake up and it's still going, and it had not stopped. Right. It was amazing.
I don't know how many Red Bulls he drinks a day to get through that on Sundays, but it's, between that and like even the ticket, Sunday NFL ticket and being able
Yeah,
to watch out of market games, and it's there's a media conversation too around like
sure.
how media obsessed we are and needing screens and things like that. But
Right.
I mean, and the influx of ADHD in our
Yeah.
society,
Yeah.
those are two things that they allow those ways of the brain being wired to enjoy
Right.
NFL, enjoy football on Sundays, and
Fair.
see all of just the red zone action, right? That you get the
Yeah.
name because for those listening, that hopefully you know what football is. We're not the New Heights podcast over here. Having to
Right. Hopefully.
answer no dumb questions, but
Hopefully not.
um, it's those scoring moments, like watching the action. At its height, at its peak, in a game, like those important moments you don't want to miss.
Yeah.
So being able to switch to those on a dime,
4 boxes.
right?
Hey,
And the four
we're gonna
boxes,
go 4 box.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Now that's a thing you can do on your own, right?
That's right.
YouTube will offer. I think they did it with all the ticket anyway, but watching YouTube TV, and that's what I'm subscribed to over here. We don't have wired cable into the house. It's YouTube TV,
Me too.
and
Yeah.
having the 4 boxes on my screen that I can
Yeah.
adjust and look at. So it's just
Well, I think, like I say, I'm a baseball guy, and it always upsets me when football comes up with all these great ideas, and I'm
yeah.
like, baseball, where are you guys at? Come on now. You invented fantasy, and you let them pass you, and people don't even, rotisserie.
Well,
That's chicken, right? I was like, well, yeah, but it's also what they called the baseball leagues originally. They were rotisserie leagues, and nobody does anymore because it's hard work. Just like the sport, they play every day. It's hard work. But football has taken advantage of so many of these great things, like the red zone. Who would have ever thought? You know what?
That's the way to
I'm
do it.
just going to show one little play here and there, and people are going to love this. And then you wait, and then at the end of the day, you get the montage. And let's say I would keep it on because hey, maybe cooking dinner or something. I want to be able to go back and rewind to watch the montage because it was always so good. It's like, hey, we had 76 touchdowns today, and we're going to show every single one of them. Like, this is genius.
Yeah.
So
man.
They're so good. They're so good at these things.
There's a George Carlin reference in here, right? I'm glad you brought up baseball because his baseball football monologue is one of my favorite.
It's so good.
It's just how demanding and commanding football is
as
a sport, and it's all
baseball,
war-based. And
baseball just want to get home.
Right. You want to get home safe.
I just want to get home.
I want to be safe.
I just want to be safe at home. That's right. It's so great.
It's a good one. But
yeah, that's another one, kids. He's been dead a long time, but you can go look that up. Look up Carlin's baseball versus football. It's funny. We've been talking here for a while now. We have not even mentioned Saturday football at all. It's incredible. It's only been, Sunday football, and I do want to bring up, Saturday football. I'm struggling with it right now as we sit here, 2023. They have almost become Sunday football.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost a free agency now, and it's tough, but in its purest form, it's still amazing.
Yeah.
Granted, the Monday through Friday stuff irritates me. In the news right now, you got this huge Michigan scandal and the NLA going on, and we're firing coaches with $75 million left to be paid.
Right. It's an unreal world.
What kind of world are we living in? But on Saturday, once the clock starts, these kids are still amazing.
It's impressive to watch.
And they're not thinking about any of that stuff. They're thinking about living and dying for the generations who love this school, and it's incredible.
Those are probably the closest atmosphere. I know NFL atmospheres are great, and they are what they are, but the college football atmospheres, like watching Michigan, when they come out, the whiteouts at Penn State, and Big Ten up here. I know you're heavy in the ACC and SEC, but like the Big Ten environments up here, what kind of stand out, and Iowa, looking at the children's hospital and that sort of those environments are close. The closest thing we probably have in this country to soccer abroad.
Yeah,
and not to mention soccer on 2 episodes in a row for you.
No, and I'm not going to talk about it because even they're envious of some of the things that go on.
Like you see just the complete color outs in the stadiums and the way. It's kids and alumni and just general fans of the team being there that all get up and create unreal
It's
atmospheres.
unreal. You say certain words. You say, I'm an old school metalhead. I love Metallica, but you say Enter Sandman, and you immediately think of Virginia
Virginia Tech.
Tech,
Yep.
and it's incredible. And I grew up with House of Pain,
Yeah.
so a jump around I've had for 30 years. Wisconsin has almost taken that themselves. When you think jump around, you think those kids destroying Camp Randall. It's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that. Tom Petty passed about 5 years ago, and going into the third and fourth quarter, the Gators, man, they play won't back down, and the whole stadium is, and you're just like, man, this is incredible. And so I think that's part of why I
Yeah.
love it so much. That the
There's so
Saturday
much
game.
buy-in. There's so much buy-in. And
Yeah, and it's like a family thing. Now,
yeah.
granted, hey, you love the Eagles, you were there, but you didn't go.
Right. Right. I
There is
didn't
no
attend
tie.
that school.
Right,
I
right,
didn't attend
right.
University of Philadelphia Eagles.
No, I know.
It's just
And your grandfather didn't, and your father, and your great grandfather,
right.
and so you
It's a
have this
lineage thing.
aspect. Yes, for
Well, the only
generations.
the sad thing to me about it, you mentioned the Monday to Friday stuff, but even the reshuffling of conferences and how that doesn't
Terrible.
it's not going to mean anything. It's already starting to get to that point, but like California schools joining the Big Ten, which that is just a number. Big 10, Big 12. What's that mean anymore?
Well, let's be honest. There's two of them that joined the ACC.
Right.
So it's
Atlantic
literally
Coast
the
Conference.
Atlantic Coast Conference that has
Plus
two
California.
Pacific Coast teams.
So Atlantic Coast, California, and California.
Yeah, I think the running joke is
ACCC?
any coast conference is
Any
what they're going to
coast.
call this one. Yeah, yeah, but
Oh man.
like that, it does. But and granted, I hate all that. I'm the crotchety old guy. I hate all of that. But at the end of the day, at noon on Saturday, at 3:30 on
You'll watch.
Saturday, those kids will still go at
They'll
it,
be there.
and they'll still go at it for Carolina and Clemson and Alabama and Georgia, California, Stanford, whoever. They still go at it for that, and the band will still play these iconic fight songs, and and we'll still watch.
Yeah.
And it stinks to lose some of these great rivalries. I get it, but at the end of the day, man, these kids are still going at it for their school.
Yeah. And
Very
some
cool.
of the greatest names of rivalries too, like the Backyard Brawl, the Red River Rival. Like it's just Tobacco Road.
Yeah.
That even does that matter as much in football?
They hate each other and everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
So, it works out. But like
it
some
does.
of the greatest names of rivalry and like trophies and axes and
yeah.
whatever it might be, to fight over. It's just
this is a jug that's 100 years old. Hey, let's make this the trophy. Okay.
Okay.
Incredible.
You mentioned some of those old things. This is a completely different topic, but I got to, knowing that we were going to be talking football, I got to looking at, obviously Super Bowl is the thing that garners the most attention worldwide.
Yeah.
100 million views, regularly. I actually,
absolutely.
Looking recently, it dipped under 100 million for a few years.
Oh, yeah.
During like the COVID era. So,
okay.
Which would make no sense because people are at home. What else do they have to do but watch
What
the
are you
Super Bowl?
doing? Yeah.
But, it comes back above 110 for Eagles Chiefs last year for the first time in like 5 years.
Interesting.
But, obviously one of the most viewed sporting single events, of the year of any calendar year.
Right.
Interestingly enough, Super Bowl era, 57 years this year, there's a trophy in professional football that is older and been around way longer than the Lombardi Trophy. And it happens to be played for by our neighbors to the north, the Grey Cup.
That's right.
Canadian Football League. You think that, we have a lot to do with football, the history of football, and it's our sport. I mean, you could see viewership up there. I think their Grey Cup championship game, it might be in the single-digit millions compared to what we do.
Sure.
I think the Super Bowl had 3 million views in Mexico, something like that. But the history of the sport goes back further in Canada than it does America.
Yeah, their professional league started before ours did, correct?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
1909 was like the first Grey Cup, but they call it, so it was the Canadian Football Rugby League.
Yeah.
They play, it was a rugby trophy. So it's gone through different, I think a university won the first edition of it. It was like Toronto, University of Toronto.
Interesting.
So they win the first one, and it's got a 109-year history though.
That's
114
incredible.
years it's been played for 109 times. There's a couple times off,
Wow.
wars and whatnot, but 109 editions of the Grey Cup championship game.
That
So
is wild.
more storied than the
And
NFL.
it is. It is. And now it's weird with the soccer length field. It's wider, it's
Mm-hmm.
longer, it's 3 downs as
Yeah.
opposed to 4.
Yep. Just a
It's a
lot of
different.
different variations to what's going on, but neat to see
Yes.
that,
It,
as much as it is our sport, there's a more storied history elsewhere.
that's a great, yeah. Yeah. Now they have to play it in the summer
They
because
do. They can't compete
yeah,
with the NFL.
you can't compete with the NFL. And by the time you get in the Grey Cup, it would be so covered in
Yeah,
snow
forget
they
it.
would have no shot.
Oh,
Yeah. No,
but
that's a great point.
and
That's a great point.
they treat it like the Stanley Cup. The Grey Cup gets passed
Sure.
around. There's only one version of it. They add to it, and it's got plaques that get attached to it with names and things like that. So, very different to how they treat the Grey Cup as opposed to the Lombardi Trophy, and
Sure.
just
Yeah.
interesting to see.
No, I love it. I love it. And I'm gonna go off on a 1 minute side note here. Is I have my Washington Sentinels jersey on, which is from one of my favorite movies ever, The Replacements. Which, as stupid as a comedy it is, it's actually based in truth. In
The lockout era.
'87,
Yep.
'87 they locked out and they brought in replacement players.
The owners
And
were
a
like,
lot of
"Screw
the
you."
exactly. And a lot of the other teams, these big name guys crossed. They didn't care. Union be damned. I don't care. But Washington didn't. No Washington Redskin at the time crossed. So these replacement players
Mhm.
win a game to get them in the playoffs. It's amazing. So the actual movie is based in fact. Now, the reason they have replacement players is I think 5 years before in like '82 they had struck and they just stopped.
Yep.
And the reason I know anything about Canadian football is that they showed Canadian football during the strike of '82. So this 9-year-old kid, because you can get
what?
like a point for
Right.
running a ball out of an end zone. You're like,
like what weird rules are we playing by?
What happened? Why are you punting on 3rd down? This seems like the worst strategy ever.
Oh.
But anyway, if you were born in '90, man, you don't know any labor issues with the NFL. That's another reason they're so strong, is they've not had some of the same things that some of the other sports have. Well, it goes back to they made these awful mistakes in the '80s where they had these 2 strikes.
Yeah.
And but that's my association with Canadian football is as a
unreal.
9-year-old kid going, well, there's no NFL on, so NBC is going to show the Argonauts and whoever else.
Right.
And they're
the
on
Alouettes.
this really,
Montreal Alouettes.
the Alouettes.
Right.
Yes.
And think about that. Without
wide field.
Without that, there might be no Shane Falco.
There would have been no Shane Falco. But yes.
No story to tell.
This is not. It's not super. It's not like in the closet type stuff. But go see The Replacements if you haven't seen it.
Movie.
It's incredible.
Great movie.
And once again, it's told as a comedy and it's funny and stuff. But kids, as you're watching it, it is based in truth.
There's a lot of truth to it.
Yeah. Now they didn't. The cheerleaders didn't strike. They didn't have to replace the cheerleaders, which is still the dumbest aspect of this movie. As when the NFL guys go on strike, the cheerleaders do too. So we have to replace the cheerleaders. It's still the dumbest part of this amazing movie. This movie's a 99% out of 100. That's the 1%. It's like, this is so stupid. But anyway.
Gotta have some love story aspect to it. Wouldn't be Hollywood without it.
That's right. That's right.
Too good. Well, I want to throw a question at you.
Sure.
Because we both have teams in our in our cities, Panthers, Eagles, that have had some superstars on some really crappy teams. I think of a Randall Cunningham. Never really had much. Didn't win a championship. You're without one to this point, but you've had some really crap. Would you rather? This is a would you rather question. Would you rather be a Randall Cunningham, or a Cam Newton even, right? On a crappy team, or would you want to be? I don't know who it would be for you, but I'm thinking like a. I can't say Freddie Mitchell, like a James Thrash for me, for Eagles fans, on a team that goes and wins a Super Bowl.
Wow.
Would you want to be that like third string running back, maybe see some special teams time. On
to
a Super
win the
Bowl
Super
contender,
Bowl as opposed to never win one.
but having
Yeah,
like a Hall of Fame career.
sure. That's a great question. Yeah. Uh, the Hall of Fame career is tough to turn down.
It is.
You know,
The notoriety, and you live
it,
beyond the era
you know,
of when you played, right?
you absolutely
But you don't
do.
have that
And
ring, and that's the knock that
yeah,
you'll hear about for the rest of your life.
absolutely. But I think it was Barkley who said, you know what, it's something important. You know, like, I don't care. I still have all the checks that
Yeah.
they gave me. All this stuff, and I have these great memories and all this stuff. So yeah, I don't know. The star on almost good teams as opposed to that one chance. I think I'd probably go for the career. I think
I'm with you. I'm
you know,
100% with you. I need to
and
have that individual success to know that I was good at what I did.
yeah,
Championships be damned, as horrible as that sounds, coming from a Philly
yeah,
guy, like where we would trade our firstborn for a
sure,
championship. So,
yeah. I mean, if you think about it, granted, in the what was going on, it's awful. But think about Jim Kelly and Thurman
yeah.
Thomas, who lost those four,
Mm-hmm.
and painful,
Listen,
painful.
I went through the early 2000s, 4 straight NFC Championship
You
games,
did
3
too. That's
lost,
right.
and
Yeah,
only to go and then lose the Super Bowl. So
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
rough go.
We beat you in one of
You
them.
did. Yep.
Yeah. That's a fun story. So we beat you guys, and we go to play the
New England.
Patriots
Yep.
in Houston in the new,
Mm-hmm.
NRG Stadium. It had grass back
Yep.
then, but it's an awful game. I don't think anybody
Oh, it's
scores in the
terrible.
first quarter or the third quarter, but all the scoring is in the second and the fourth. So in the second quarter, New England goes up maybe 14-0, and the Panthers get a late field goal to go 14-10, something like that. And then nobody scores in the third again. You're like, oh. And then that fourth quarter is one of the most exciting quarters you will ever watch in football. They go back and forth and
Vinatieri made his
back and
name in that
forth.
game, right? That was the game winner. Did he
Well,
have a
it's
game
his
winner?
second.
Second game
He
winner.
had
That's
he
what
had
it was.
already beat
The
St.
Rams.
Louis. He
Yeah.
already beat the Rams
Yep.
with the game winner in New Orleans for the in 02, and this is
Yeah.
this is a
This is
couple years
04.
later. So, but this is this is the second time he does. But we tied the game up with, I don't know, 90 seconds to go, and John Casey is an icon. I think he was played at Georgia, but he played forever. I think he's the longest tenured Panther. Love him, man. Kicker, scored all thing. They tie the game. Ricky Prohl catches a touchdown pass. He played at Wake Forest here in Winston Salem.
Yep.
It's all this great stuff. John Casey kicks the ball off out of bounds,
Yeah.
and they give Tom Brady the ball at the
40-yard line.
40
Yeah.
with like 90 seconds to go, and it didn't even take much. But I think it's still around 40. It's not an easy field goal, but he buries it at the buzzer. And I can remember still the Winston-Salem Journal. It just had one word on the cover, and it just said "dang" with an exclamation point. We did. We tied that, and there'd been no overtime Super Bowls up until that point.
Nope.
Yeah, and
Falcons Patriots become the first one in
it's
a couple of years ago.
it's much later, yes. But man, that hurt. Side note, it's also the Janet Jackson and Justin
the
Timberlake
slip.
Super Bowl.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
The slip.
the wardrobe malfunction. Yeah,
That's
our
interesting. So
yeah,
that happens for yours. I get
yeah.
JT for the Eagles win.
Ah, nice.
So
Yes.
there's a connection.
Yeah, he goes in the crowd and sings to
Twisted
the
arrow.
kid and makes
Yeah.
his.
Freddie Mitchell's
it,
next to him. He's in the crowd,
yeah,
sitting next to. He's like walking down the steps, and Freddie Mitchell's right there.
that's incredible.
FredEx. There you go.
But
Man.
yeah, but that's the other Super Bowl is nowhere near as good. They're both terrible. It's Peyton Manning by the end of his career couldn't do much.
Right.
But we did nothing offensively that day.
That was a slobber knocker of a game, if I remember right.
Awful.
Real bad.
Yeah. Just a terrible game. But if you did want to go back, and the first Panthers Super Bowl, I think it's 38, and that fourth quarter is worth it.
Yeah.
It's the ending stinks, but to see John Casey kick that ball out of bounds, it's just awful.
Heartbreaker.
It's awful. But anyway, yeah, that's a great one, and that's what's so funny about all of this stuff, be it football, be it baseball. I can still I just rambled off what just
Yeah.
happened, and that was, gosh, what, almost 20 years ago.
Right. It's unreal.
I think it will be, coming up, but that's what sports does, man. That's what, football, baseball, you name it. It
Creates
takes you
lifelong
back
memories,
to,
whether
it does.
good
It
or
takes,
hard, like, absolutely devastating. I'm
yeah,
as
it
a
takes
Philly
you back
fan,
to a
plenty of
different
devastating
era.
ones. So it's,
Yeah. Heck yeah.
you got McNabb hurling in the huddle the final 2 minutes of a game where you got T.O. that, comes back from a broken ankle to
That's right.
still playing on a broken ankle, and not coming up short in a game the following year right after that, right? 39 in Jacksonville.
You're right. Yeah.
Having to,
You're the year later. Yeah. Cause they win 3 or 4.
Yep.
The Patriots win 3 or 4.
Yeah. And just watching that happen, to just all of those years prior, like losing some incredible teams that just couldn't get over the hump. Andy Reid, man. Oh,
yeah.
Tough to watch, but, it's
fun fact, kids. Andy Reid is in the punt, pass, and kick competition when he's 12 years old. It may be the greatest piece of film
ever
of all time. I mean, it still. I think I watch it every year just because it is like the greatest piece of film.
He's
Andy
the
Reid,
largest human being, largest child next to all these like just
yeah,
infants.
and
He makes
Andy
them look
Reid,
like
Andy Reid at 12 is like 6'5",
yeah,
and 300 pounds, and you're like,
what
the
are you
kid
doing
beside
here?
him, yeah. It is
Who let
incredible.
this Green Bay Packer on the field?
It is one of the greatest pieces. I don't know how we have it. I just want to thank whoever
He
saved
did it
this.
and saved it and keeps republishing.
Because
keeps
Monday Night Football, randomly, Andy Reid, it's what the internet was built for, man. Somebody saved this thing. Go watch it. It's incredible.
All right. Well, we've talked a lot of, football, right? That's what this episode is about. We hit every angle of it. College, NFL. We went north of the border. So, lots awesome. Going on. And it's a sport. I mean, it's pretty much centralized to North America, but it's been around all our lives. So, dates back, professional organized football. In the Princeton, Harvard's always like recognized as the first American football game, right?
Yeah, and then like Lafayette and somebody else plays one that's
it's like one of those like Jersey school. I think Rutgers might be involved in that too. I'd have to go back.
I think they are as well.
Look up first professional football game.
Very long time, yes.
But so lots of eras to potentially Rutgers versus Princeton. That's what it was, not Princeton Harvard. Princeton Rutgers. 1869. So it's been around a while.
Yeah.
Where would you we round it up, right? Every episode. What era would you prefer to exist during? There's a lot of great ones out there.
There are. I will say this. I think baseball lends itself more to historical eras.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I just think it does. So to me, I believe that football begins essentially with Super Bowl I. And granted, I get it. The 50s era is huge. That actually cuts Jim Brown, who may have been the best football player ever. I get it. I understand that. But when I think of football, I think of Super Bowl I is kind of where it begins. So for me, if I have to go, okay, which era would I pick? Be the homer, but my era, it's tough to beat. The 80s era, so many great players, and they did start to figure out. We talked about the video games, pulling that sort of stuff into the whole aspect of football, and ESPN picks up football in the 80s as well, and so you start getting these other ways to see games, and I think about some of the players, from the 80s. You got these 70s guys with Staubach and Terry Bradshaw and all these things, but the 80s we get the Dan Marinos of the world. You get youngest towards the end, but Montana is this icon, and Phil Simms, and you get Washington winning.
You also had to watch Theismann's leg break in half, though.
You get the blind side with Lawrence Taylor, who went to Carolina. So he's from Virginia, but he went to Carolina. But you get Lawrence Taylor, and you get Theismann's leg, and all these iconic things. And I don't know, it's very, very tough to beat. Now, granted, we do have the two strikes, which sucks, but we get the movie The Replacement because of it, as we've said. And they were fun, man. It was a time. I was thinking back about the celebrations. They would have these Fun Bunch and Smurfs, and they started doing these celebrations and stuff like that, and it was just,
And they
I don't
wouldn't
know,
get flagged for it.
and they would not get flagged for it. Yeah, it was such a good
Yeah.
time of like I say, iconic quarterbacks
Yeah, absolutely.
and these things. And we have the '85 Bears, which for 1 year may have been the best team ever.
Hmm.
So you've got that. It's a pretty amazing time. The '90s, because the Panthers show up, is interesting to me as well.
Yeah.
But my '80s is probably going to be where I go.
90s football fashion was something. I still think, I think I mentioned it at the top here, but, from my
Yeah.
early fandom days, but the starter jackets and
Oh my
everything that
gosh.
did, like, those were iconic.
You're right. You're right.
And just like,
Apex.
yeah.
All yeah.
Everyone walking
Yeah.
around in like the Will Smith attire, Fresh Prince, looking like Fresh Prince. It was something.
Who's the kid? The kid there for Minnesota, the quarterback, Kirk Cousins,
Yeah,
played
yeah.
for Washington.
Yeah.
Walks into a press conference with a vintage '93
Yeah.
Washington starter jacket,
Yep.
and the place just
Erupts.
wow.
Some great stuff.
And
Yep.
you forget about. You're right, man. That was incredible. The starter
Yeah.
jacket was so
I
awesome.
think I still have one. I wonder what I could sell that for today.
Oh my gosh.
I wonder if it's like
Yeah.
actually worth something, or if it's like Beanie Baby value worth something.
Yeah. Yeah. You kids get the advantage of they realized merchandising was incredible.
Yeah.
Granted, Star Wars kind of starts it all in the '70s, but it took a little while for sports to realize we can do this too.
We could have a hand in this.
Yeah, and now you can get anything you want. You can get your own.
You see the
jersey,
vintage
all
thing
this stuff.
too, like it's all coming back, right? I think about I'm wearing talk about vintage. This was
Sure.
I think they made this uniform. I don't know that they ever officially wore. This was like a city edition
Yeah.
jersey. For those that don't know, obviously Brian Dawkins jersey, but an Eagles jersey that they wore once or twice.
Yeah.
And it had to do with the city's colors are this baby blue and yellow, and they wore them. McNabb, I think, was around for it, and it was not a great looking jersey, but it was ours, which is why I loved it. It sold like
Right.
hotcakes around here. But you look at today, it took us I don't know 30 years to get Kelly Green back. They wore it once. To be fair, they wore like a real fake version of the Kelly
Mhm.
Greens back. I want to say, I think I remember McCoy running around the field for a game with them, back in that sort of time frame for the Eagles. But we finally have it, and it's like a full
Embrace
uniform.
Yeah,
it's
they have
part of the
embraced that again.
rotation now.
That's right.
So and then like every other team, you got the Seattle Seahawks who had their throwback. Like this was the year of throwbacks, 2023. The creamsicles, those have come back.
Yeah.
So like it's a lot of that, which
Buccaneer Bruce, man, it's good
yeah,
stuff.
it's cool to see those come back. So, but thinking about eras, and you mentioned those way back days. Not that it's the era I would pick, but I would be intrigued by those years, and not because it's during the World War. Like I would not that I want to exist during that time, but the Steagles, that team, the Pittsburgh Philadelphia Steagles, and seeing what it was like to watch teams combine. It's also around the time Bednarik gets, a few years later. That the mid '40s is the Steagles. That the Steelers do it again the following season with the Cardinals, and they're the Pittsburgh, St. Louis like the Pit Cards they were calling themselves. So like they combined for a second season after they had done it with the Eagles.
Really?
So it would be intriguing to see that, but also like for the Eagles aspect of things, Bednarik gets drafted in '49, and you talk about all-time two-way players and what they bring to the game. He was it. Like he was the guy. So to see him and everything he meant to the sport, and then too, like knowing that I believe he was part of the team, the 1960 team that. Vince Lombardi, his championship record, if you look at it, there is one loss in a championship game, and it is to the Eagles.
Wow.
So, it was like tail end of his coaching career, but It doesn't.
No, it's
Or
early.
early. I'm sorry, I got it
Yeah.
backwards. So
Yep.
early coaching career, but he never loses again in the championship game. And
That makes
so
sense. Yeah. Wow.
that's it. The Eagles have that mark against him forever. So
Yeah.
it's all, I believe it was with. I don't know if it was with Green Bay. Did he coach Washington at the end too? So it must have been with Green Bay.
At the end, he does. He
He
comes.
coaches Washington.
He's at the Giants first, but I don't think he's a head coach. I think
Right.
he's a coordinator, and then he comes to Green Bay and he dominates the '60s. And '67, I think he retires after winning Super Bowl II
Yep.
or 68, somewhere around in there.
So
And then Washington brings him back maybe a year or so later.
right, but like knowing that exists there. But again, that's not the era
Yeah,
I'd pick.
that's good though.
So I feel like again, this might be just because I grew up in the era and the bias there. But you talk about the quarterbacks at your era. I think
Mm-hmm.
in 15, 20 years, when we look back at what we just got out of,
Mm-hmm.
I think we have just passed. We're at like the passing of the torch. Brady actually retiring was like the closing of a chapter of quarterbacks that I don't know we'll ever see again. I mean, you talk
Yeah.
about field generals and what they meant to the
Yeah.
sport and the records that they consistently broke, and then like were competing with each other to see who would retire,
Sure.
who could last longest, and hold the record at the end. I mean, you got Brady, you got Manning, you got Breeze,
Yeah.
you got the other Manning, whether people want to admit it or not.
Sure.
I mean, the guy
Yeah.
goes and wins 2 Super Bowls against Brady, so I think that's
right.
saying something. But
It
so
is
did Nick
saying
Foles.
something.
So
Yeah.
we just
Nick only beat him once,
he
so
did.
Eli got him
He
twice.
got him twice. But I mean, you talk about just those are
Yeah.
names that will have the weight of
Sure.
Manning and Young
Sure.
and Marino and Staubach. They sit at the top of the record boards with them. Passing.
Yeah,
I know we're in a passing league now.
Yeah.
So the eras are a little different in terms of how the game's played, but like the impact that those individuals had, I think this is probably the strongest era of quarterback play we've ever seen. And we're coming up on a new one. I mean, you look at the
Yeah.
Hurts and the Mahomes, and
Sure.
I mean the
Yeah.
Burrows.
Mahomes will stand toe to toe with the Elways, Marinos, the Mannings, the Brady. He's unreal.
And I know it's a quarterback league. It's a quarterback-driven league, and rightfully so.
They're very much more protected.
Yeah, and that's the other side of it. So this is the era, but like that Brady, Manning, Breeze era, is what I would pick. You could throw Phillip Rivers in there for crying out loud, like just how important he was to the success of that franchise.
North Carolina State kid.
Yeah. So like you could throw them in there, but it is the other side of it. That's my era, but it's where you also get introduced to the no fun league.
Right.
Right. You get the NFL that becomes the no fun league. And I mean, here's the thing. It's the reason you see a lot of the rule changes and, protection of the quarterback and even like protection of defenseless wide receivers and I guess linebackers too. You see running backs these days getting ridiculous fines for just, lowering their shoulder and trying not to get tackled. And they wind up with like tens of thousands of dollars in fines. But I mean, you could pinpoint the whole concussion discussion and, the lawsuit the league faced and the millions and millions of hundreds of millions, if not billions at this point of dollars that have been earmarked for player payments, retired player payments, because of ongoing health issues because of the sport. So you get the reaction to everything that has gone on and continues to go on with football. So as much as it's called the no fun league these days for whatever reason, there's other things that they do too, like the flags for celebrating and all that sort of not knowing what a catch is today versus.
It's fair. I think back. It's an interesting point there, Rob, again, because like in my day, in my era, it doesn't hold as much weight, but Sports Illustrated just it dominated sports journalism for 50 years at least. It was like the quintessential. If you wrote for Sports Illustrated, that was the top of the mountain. That was the greatest thing. Well, in the 80s, Sports Illustrated would need subscribers, so they would advertise, and if you signed up for Sports Illustrated, you would get a free video, and many of these videos were all based around massive hits.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
I
Right.
can remember one specifically called Crunch Course, and it was 60 minutes of legit NFL film, real stuff, the Sable guys, just
Didn't
showing
ESPN's
people.
Monday Night Football do something too? Like, not, I know more recently it was like the Moss because they had Randy Moss, but didn't they have a big hits segment for a while? Yeah,
Absolutely, they would have these big hits because that's what
it's what
the
the
game
sport
was
was sold
built
on. It was
on.
everyone, you
Yes,
knew it was a violent sport,
yes,
and lo and behold, wow, people are gonna watch for the
yeah.
hits. Get out! It's like
It's
people watch. It's the same. It's the same argument that's made around NASCAR. Let's be real. People watch for the wrecks,
sure, yeah,
right? So people
there.
watch for those, like, oh, that looks like it hurts. I don't want to. Like, I shouldn't be
That's right.
looking, but I'm seeing legal violence happen,
I
on
mean,
my television screen, and it's awesome.
think about this. 30 years ago, you would have never dreamed of this. But what's one of the fastest growing, sports that we have is MMA,
Yeah,
which would be
yeah.
like 30 years ago, this was
There's
a
a
joke.
there's a league, the bare knuckle
Yeah,
fighting, right? It's like
yeah,
that. Let's take the pads off and be even more violent. It's
exactly.
like,
So,
oh,
it is what it is. That's what it, but the unintended consequence of all this, like you were talking about, is,
yeah,
all these poor guys, man, and these,
absolutely.
injuries that they have now.
Well, even more
It's
recently, Damar Hamlin and everything you saw go down
Oh
with,
my God.
I mean, a guy literally almost losing his life on the field, like
Yes.
something that you never thought would be. So, I mean, for as not fun as people think it has become,
Yeah.
it's a move in the right direction for the sport. And this is
Had
coming from
had to
two
be
guys
done.
that have never played I played, correction, I played Pee Wee football. So
I did too.
I played second grade, 55-pound team, starting
Okay.
center. I snapped the
Nice.
ball. I was on that O line. I played in the trenches, so
Hey,
I get it.
yeah. So I was fourth and fifth grade,
Yeah.
and I played on possibly the greatest fifth grade team ever. We did we didn't get scored on the entire year. We shut out
Okay,
seven
85 Bears. You
seven
got nothing on
opponents. It's
Doug's fifth grade team.
yeah, my fifth grade Arcadia Packers is got to go down as the greatest fifth grade team ever. Now,
That's
granted,
awesome.
I got in, at least 3 plays a game. I was in kickoff and return, play a little wide receiver. Had
That's
nothing to do
awesome.
with it, but it's still like we still joke about it. Like, we
That's
didn't
so
get
good.
scored on, but that was
The
my
72
my
Dolphins,
peak.
right?
Yes,
It's like,
they got scored on. They may have won
they
every
gave
game, but
up
they got
points.
scored. They gave up points.
That's awesome.
We never did.
Whoa.
But that is the peak of my football play.
You mentioned the hitting, and I to go back to it and just how commercialized it was. You remember there were games, and I may be jumping ahead on a
Yeah.
segment on us, but let's go into that. So
Yeah,
let's go into
let's
the
go into the treasure chest. It's time for
yeah.
our twisted era treasure chest. We'll let Rob go first.
So it's a fun segment. We can highlight something from each of our eras where kids today, I get to say it still, kids today may not know, what exactly the hell we're talking about, and that's the fun
That's right.
stuff. Is
That's right.
dial-up internet? What? Even DSL. Do you know what that stands for? What? I know.
Hey, no internet here,
right.
dude.
Rotary phones? What?
Yeah.
Phones with no screens? What?
What?
Yeah. So these were things that we existed with, and
That's right.
talking about from the football mindset, arcades are a thing. They still are a thing, but probably not as widespread as they used to be back in the day. A significant portion of my childhood was spent at this place called Challenges in the Willow Grove Mall,
Nice.
an arcade where I had many a birthday party.
Nice.
And it was more about actually enjoying games like Mortal Kombat and
yeah.
You got Street Fighter, I think was there. The Simpsons arcade games, pinball
Yes.
machines. They were all a thing. And Bart swinging his skateboard as a weapon at the aliens.
March had the vacuum cleaner.
So some great games, back in my day. One of which, was NFL Blitz, and this is a game franchise that ultimately comes to PlayStation 2, I believe, and as well as the N64. Where I first, kids today will know Madden. a franchise that's been around for a very long time.
Yeah.
Late eight. Does it make its debut in the early
It,
90s?
it, it possibly the first few versions. He comes on pretty early.
Yeah.
But yeah, late '80s, early '90s is the first Madden version.
So that is it for football video games today. Like there might be, I'm not counting, and rightfully so, I think, because they don't get to that level of people knowing about it and important significance, I think, in the gaming world
Yeah.
of a Madden. Like that, I'm not counting the phone apps and those games and stuff, but there were alternate football games out there for you back in the day.
That's right.
And NFL Blitz being one of them. There's also NFL Street, I think we determined, right? There was like offshoots of these same games, but it was a game entirely built around the concept of, building up your status bar, your power bar, and then unleashing it into these ungodly tackles.
Exactly.
I mean, you might as well have put a rocket on the back of someone, strapped a bazooka to them, and then shot the guy off the field.
That's it.
I'm pretty sure that was one of the animations. Was
I guarantee
exploding,
it was.
And launching bombs down the field that were literal bombs into the end zone that turned into footballs at the last second so that your wide receivers could catch them. But it was like, it was football in name, but like it was an incredible experience to play those kinds of games where it took the action on the field, just made it even more violent.
It did. It did. And the NFL was behind it. It 100%. Used all their logos and all their good stuff.
There was a want for it, because when it gets to N64 and when it gets to PlayStation, you notice that it's got the EA Sports name on it. It's a franchise. It was a portion of, or a part of that franchise, so EA had Madden, but it was like, wow, there's such a following for this, and I don't know if we'll ever see it come back, maybe. But it's kind of, it was like the NBA Jam of the day, right?
Yeah.
So like and I believe made by the same people that made NBA Jam. So you make 3 shots in a row, you're on fire, and then you can't miss. Right?
That's right.
He's on fire.
Yes.
So
you could jump out of the gym. It was amazing.
Right.
Yes.
It was incredible.
Yes.
The rainbow shots and whatnot. So it was just, I remember growing up with those and just thinking, like, this was what football games were supposed to be like. You weren't supposed to have full access to a full playbook and call hot routes and audible at the line and be Peyton Manning with a controller in your hand. You just nailed people.
It did. It's just boom.
Just truck stick them before you knew what truck sticking was.
That's right.
And you wouldn't get fined for it. You didn't have to worry about a flag being
thrown. You actually got bonus points for
it. So incredible time. Incredible piece of treasure.
So I thought about, there's a lot of things for my my treasure chest for football related stuff. There's way more baseball movies.
Yeah.
So my favorite football movie is The Replacements. It is, but I tried to go a little bit deeper, a little bit, higher brow here. But for one of my favorite things was I loved HBO's Real Sports.
Oh yeah.
Brian Gubble. They still do it. It's not the same, but it's been on for so long, and it's so many tremendous stories. But one of my favorites was Frank DeFord. Frank DeFord wrote for Sports Illustrated for like 50 years. Great writer. He'd done a lot of great pieces in Sports Illustrated. He did a lot of great real sports stuff. But if you go back to the early 80s, I think it's 1981, he wrote a piece of fiction, and it was called Everybody's All-American. And I actually find this later on. I was only 8. It's not. I wasn't reading Everybody's All-American when I was 8. I found this later on, but what he wrote was essentially a look at 1950s era college football.
Ooh.
And he based it in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And I think his name was Gavin Gray, the Galloping Ghost. And he wrote about this hero of college football in the 50s, and he wrote about everything that was going on in there. And it is really good. It's a really good book that not many people, I guarantee, have even heard of. Like I say, 1981, Everybody's All-American. They made it into a movie. It's okay. I think the movie came out in the late 80s. It's I think Dennis Quaid and Jessica Lange, and I don't know if they didn't want to focus on Carolina, but they moved it. They moved it to
Oh,
LSU.
that's
So
no.
exactly. So he actually in the movie he plays for LSU. So both schools claim that well the book is about Charlie Choo Choo Justice, who was the greatest player in Carolina history, and the LSU people claim it's whoever from LSU that. And he's like, no, it was just a composite of completely fictitious. But everybody's All American 1981, and I think Frank reads it on Audible, so
Oh
it's a
wow.
good listen.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
That's good
So
stuff. If
my
your jersey says what you would pick if there was a runner-up football movie for you, because
oh
there are still, you mentioned it, baseball as a sport, and
oh
in Hollywood there are way more baseball movies, just a
sure,
more poetic game, right? Again, calling
yeah, it
back to
is.
George Carlin and
Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
It's a fun game to try to create around do stuff with Hollywood. There's still
Sure,
some football ones out there, you know.
there are, but I don't think. I mean, like I say, I love the replacements,
Yeah,
and some of the others, longest yard.
yeah.
I will say this: you give me one more, I'm going to throw one out that you've never heard of. And Robin Williams is an icon. Hate what happened, but he's so many great movies. But in the mid '80s, he puts together a movie that, like I say, you probably never heard. It's called The Best of Times. It's a really good flick that Robin Williams played wide receiver for Taft High School in California.
Okay.
And Taft gets beat by Bakersfield every year. Bakersfield beats them every year. Well, they got this team in the '70s or whatever when he's a senior in high school is good, and Kurt Russell,
Yeah.
plays the quarterback, Reno Hightower, and they get a breakaway, and essentially Robin Williams' character drops the game-winning pass. Now, all this I'm not giving anything
Yeah,
away
yeah.
because this is the first 5 minutes of the movie. It literally tells you the past in the first 5 minutes, and then the movie is how he is trying to restage this in the present
Oh,
to be able to play this game again as now mid 30-year
that's
old
awesome.
men. But the best of times is a great
All right.
football movie that I guarantee you've never heard
Never
of,
heard
and
of.
it's Robin
Yeah.
and it's Robin Williams. It's legit.
Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, for me, it's so cliche, but remember the Titans. Knowing how true to life it is, like true story, right? T.C.
Sure.
Williams High School,
Yeah.
right outside of Washington D.C., Alexandria, Virginia. I drove by
Yeah.
it on a regular basis when I lived down there with the wife. Um, that to me, like, just there's so many, whether it's one-liners or just the great speeches that come out of it. And high school football, because that's where the dreams are born, right?
True.
There's Pee Wee and growing up, but like high school football, and I think my connection to it too now, especially having spent some time calling games and being
That's right.
we didn't even dive into our personal connections of
I,
sports
I
stringing
I
and
covered
calling
I
games,
covered
right?
covered high school
Yeah,
football for 3 years,
got
man.
got
It,
got to.
it it is amazing the passion those kids have.
Yeah, it's insane. And I sat up in a booth next to a good friend of mine, and was the color commentator to him doing play by play for 7 years for my high school.
Yeah,
So like watching those kids and how much they commit themselves to the sport, seeing that played out in Hollywood,
sure.
that's an awesome one to me. And another, this is
No.
like a guilty pleasure I have to call out, but you mentioned the All American name, and there's a show on the CW called All American, and it's loosely, it's like one of those loosely based on a true story type
Uh-huh.
deals. Um, I forget the guy's name. I'm trying to look it up quick while we're sitting here, but it's based
Sure.
on the life of a real player. His name, so Spencer Pasinger, is the guy that it's actually based off of. So the guy's name in the show is actually Spencer, and it's like following him through high school. He grew. It's L.A.,
Okay.
Southern California based, and it's Crenshaw High School, and like growing up in the rough and
Sure.
tumble, of L.A., and trying to get out of
Yeah.
that and go to college, and he has the real guy has an NFL career. Plays, I think, for the Giants, and
It looks like
drafted
the
by the
Panthers.
Giants and Dolphins a little bit. He played for the Panthers as recently as 2017, so this is like not too
Yeah.
far off. The guy had a 6-year NFL career, linebacker, if I
Wow.
remember right. It's cool to watch. Like he plays a role in helping shape the story of what it's become. Super Hollywood and super dramatic. Like a lot of high school drama, love affairs, and and
Yeah.
things that maybe he did deal with, but like it's one of those, it's the CW, so you got to take that with what it is. But another football related story, Hollywood aspect that Hollywood thing that is kind of cool to watch if you have any of those guilty pleasures. That
there you go, man. That's the perfect treasure
add
chest
to the pile.
I'd
Right?
never heard of this one. This is great. That's what we're
add
here
it to
for.
the list.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah, well, good stuff. You're right. At some point in time, this was a general football one. We talked high level football, but we can
We'll
go
dive
high school
in.
football, like you said. It being Friday night stuff, man. It's pretty wild to be able to watch and
one to leave you with is the fact that one of those high school games that I get to call is so LaSalle High School, just outside of LaSalle College High School. Let's say the full name so people know. Outside of Philadelphia Catholic League, we got St. Joe's Prep, which is probably the more nationally known team. They're regularly PA state winners, state title winners, and they travel around. They play in Jersey. They go down to IMG Academy in Florida, play those teams, and a name that came out of that school, DeAndre Swift. I got to watch him in the Philadelphia Catholic League championship game against my LaSalle Explorers run for like 300 and some yards and 6 touchdowns, man. And sit up in the booth and call that and pretend like we weren't watching an NFL player, in the making. So to see him now come back to Philly and do it for the Eagles it has been something special this season. And,
that's amazing, man.
Yeah. Like I'm sure there was Olamide Zacchaeus was also a part of that team, another Eagle that returned to the city this year and is playing with them. So there's some names. Kyle Pitts played for Archbishop Wood. Another Philly school. So I got to call it a Philadelphia Catholic kid. So
Florida kid, right? He was a Gator,
he was a
right?
Gator. So he goes down to Florida. I got to call his senior season game against our Explorers. So just weird watching these kids now become NFL players and following their careers, knowing that I was just some measly color commentator up in the booth watching them do some incredible things on the field. So.
That's
you mentioned
awesome.
It. So it's nuts.
Heck yeah.
It is nuts. So fun times.
I look forward to that one as well because it is neat to hear.
Yeah.
Fortunately, that's another dying industry, and you got to experience it in a time when it was really, really cool.
Hey, for another Twisted Eras, but
that's right.
We'll have to talk about the media and journalism. And with that dying breed. But no, it's. Fun times, always great catching up with you, man, and having these eras get twisted and have these conversations. Let us know. We need your feedback too.
Feedback,
drop a line and give us ideas. What's your favorite football era? What era would you pick if you had the choice?
That's right.
And share it with us.
And if you have a treasure chest movie that we've never heard of, we would love to hear that.
Throw it out. We'll throw it on the podcast on a future episode, and
that's right.
Do a fan made episode. One of
Sounds
these days.
Good.
Awesome. Hey, until then, keep it twisted.